Hello and welcome to Rusted Metal, where I get flack for discussing 80s metal. I'm your host, Zerb, and with me tonight is my very good buddy, Flack. How you doing, Flag?
I'm doing good, man. We just had our first tornado. I guess tornado season just started, like 3 hours ago.
I love that new window behind you there where I can see the neighbor's yard.
Golly, you know what? I have friends on Facebook. In fact, one just posted that they got their window busted out. I have some friends posting baseball-sized hail, which is pretty impressive when you see that in someone's hand, you know. So, I mean, the good thing about tornadoes around here in the Midwest is they have, you know, millions, if not billions of dollars worth of technology. It's like guys with their toys, you know, whether it's a hot rod or guns or whatever it is that people are into, they're just dying to show it off. They're dying to use it, you know what I mean? And so they have this, you know, Doppler radar and their helicopters and all this stuff, and then, you know, if there's a chance of tornado, boy, they rally, and so they give everybody lots of warning, but when it comes, it's still pretty exciting.
Yeah, you put some pictures up in the Voxer conversation I saw earlier, and it did not look pretty.
Oh yeah, it was. We were out eating, and the sky just turned this really dark orange, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I knew it was time to get out. And by the time we got to the car was rocking back and forth, and it wasn't from the Mexican food. It was from the storm that had blown in it. And I thought it was raining at first, but it was blowing like little rocks and dust and stuff, you know, up against the car. So then we just hightailed it back home and hunkered down. And
safe.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Just get in front of the TV and watch the weather guys do their stuff.
Man. Well, you just came back from another whirlwind. Would you like to discuss that and also talk about the very special person that you've got to stand next to?
I did. We last week was the kids' spring break, and so my wife and I both work for the government, and we take trips to Washington, D.C., all the time. I've been to Washington, D.C., I don't know, I've probably been a dozen times. My wife goes right now, she goes 1 week a month to
I've been
D.C.
there once for 43 years.
Well, that's pretty good stint.
Yeah,
but,
it was.
So for spring break, we were like, where should we go for spring break? And my wife says, we should go to D.C. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, we've been there so many times, but her point was, is that, you know, we go, but we don't get to see the sights. We don't get to go to the museums. We don't get to do those things. And so that was her idea. So we loaded up the kids. We drove. We actually did a detour. You know, my goal, I've had a goal for a few years now to visit all 50 states, and I'm at 45. And,
that's awesome.
And one of the and based on we've got a trip planned this summer and a trip planned this winter. So with that, the winter one will get me my 50th state.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So, but one of the ones that was on the list was Kentucky, and you know there's some states, especially when you go up to the Northeast, you know this that like when you go to D.C., you're going to be in Maryland. You're going to be, you know, depending on where you go, you may end up in Delaware. You may end up West Virginia, you know.
Right. So
I've been to a lot of those states, but now when I go there, I try to do something, you know, either related to the state or something memorable, you know. So we had this route took us through Kentucky, but I wanted to do something, you know, related. So we ended up doing the tour at the Churchill Downs.
What is the Churchill Downs?
That's the horse racing, the Derby racing.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we went to do that, and then we also went to the Louisville Slugger factory and museum, which was really cool. It was, I mean, I'm not really a baseball guy, but
that's,
you know,
that's American history, right?
Exactly. There. You know, so that was cool. And then we went up to DC and went to a million different museums. And
I saw the pictures of the natural history, and I think you did the air and space, and
we did air and space. We were in a hotel that was actually maybe a couple of blocks from there, so we walked to most of those. Air and Space and Natural History Museum and the American History Museum, and we went to the Spy Museum. So we did lots of museums. We actually took another mini road trip and went to the official Three Stooges Museum, which is in Pennsylvania, and that was
I saw those pictures.
That was fun. Yeah. And then at the end of that week, Susan and the kids, they headed back home, and I continued another 8 hours northwest of there to just outside Buffalo, New York, where I got to meet our buddy Sean, who we do throwback reviews with.
And explain, I wanted you to explain the first second that door opened up and there he was. Because I've been there before. I've told you I've met an online friend like that before, and it's amazing. But what was that like for you?
Well, we do, like when we record this show and throwback reviews and stuff, we do Google Hangouts, so we could see each other and their face, and so it wasn't quite as shocking as like, in the old days where you would maybe only talk to somebody on the phone. Or do something like that. So, I knew basically what to expect or whatever. He was taller than I thought. He's taller than me. But he lives in a small town just outside of Buffalo. And, we've done all these shows where we've talked about, he tells me about like where he works and he's sent me voicemails, or, we use Voxer. About like when he's driving to work and he drives along the Niagara River and stuff. And so, we spent some time driving around town, and so he's pointing out all these places. So it was really cool to see that stuff, the things that you've talked about. And of course on Throwback Reviews, we do a lot of retro topics and stuff. And we did one about the neighborhoods we grew up in, and all these places are like really close to one another. So we drove by his childhood house, and and all these things. So it was really fun to.
That is cool.
Yeah, to go through and see all the stuff, and then of course, it's funny because he's from New York, but it's not New York City. Most people just think of New York City if you say you're from New York.
Yeah.
And Buffalo is totally different, but. Just like New York City, they are proud of their food. So I was at Sean's house basically for a day and a half, and we ate New York pizza.
8 days worth of food.
New York wings.
Yeah.
New York hot dogs.
Oh, yeah. Those have got to be big.
New York donuts. What else? Oh, and then there's a Mexican place near his house called Mighty Taco, which
Mighty Taco.
I thought was just a great name.
I like that name.
And so I even, my wife, when I posted that, she said, "You have to get me a T-shirt." And they actually do have merchandise or whatever. So now she has a T-shirt that says Mighty Taco. I don't know.
I like that. Why she a cape and you're set for life.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but no, we had a great time, and it wasn't really like meeting somebody brand new because we've talked so much, you know what I mean?
Right.
So a lot of times when you meet somebody like that, there's those awkward silences, or you feel like you have to entertain the whole time. And it wasn't like that. We just had a good time.
That's cool.
Hanging out. Yeah. He's got, the basement of his house kind of set up like a entertainment, there's a bar down there, and
Dutchess.
a big TV Dutchess bar, yeah, and there's a dartboard and stuff. So we just hung out down there, and got to meet his kids and his wife and everything, and his wife. I don't know if you've seen Mealy Monsterland.
Oh yes.
She does.
I'm a big fan of the page and everything else.
Yeah. She does. We should put that in the show notes or something. She does all these sculptures of like little monsters, and sometimes they're holiday like theme related and stuff. And her little workshop area is downstairs, so I got to kind of poke my head in there. We stood in there for a few minutes, and you get to see like she's just sitting there talking, and you look, and she's sculpting this little monster thing that looks amazing. And I'm like, I'd have to focus on this with like every brain cell I have left, and it still would not look this good,
I figure it would be like being on the set of a Tim Burton movie or something of that nature,
It was, she had some horror pictures. She's a big fan of Night of the Comet. The classic 80s movie. She had an autograph.
I love that movie.
Picture of that. And so, that was really kind of like, peeking into the workshop and seeing how all that stuff goes. So it was, we had a great time. And then the worst part is now being, 1,300 miles from home.
Yeah.
And in a car, and now it's time to drive. But I will tell you this. I do this on a lot of my road trips. I load my phone. I use my phone, as like the music source. We used to remember when we were younger, you would take your suitcase of CDs, or before that, your briefcase of cassettes, and set off across country. And now it's just my phone, so whatever music's on my phone. And I mean, I think when I plug it in, it says you have like 5,000 songs or whatever. So I didn't hear all my music the whole trip, But I do this every time. Like there were several albums that I've been wanting to listen to, like the new Slipknot album, the new there's a I think it's Max. I think it's Cavalera. It's Cavalera Conspiracy. I don't know. It's Max Cavalera from Sepultura, but their new album. And I put all these new albums on there, and you start driving and. About 2 or 3 songs in, I'm like, I can't sing to this. I mean, it's like, because it's music I don't know. And so I go right back to the stuff that we talk about on this show. I go right back to my Anthrax and my Alice in Chains and, the old Metallica stuff and just the comfort music, the ones that every drum beat to, every guitar lick, I'm worried about on my wife's car. There's a spot in the center console. There's a little flap that opens up to the right, and the way it sits, it feels exactly like the top of my guitar, and it is the perfect fake guitar strumming area. You know what I mean? Like with your thumb.
Your air guitar.
It's your air guitar. Well, of course, it's not really air guitar. It's like steering wheel guitar, because your other hand is on the steering wheel and you're doing chords and pulling off solos. So if I ever, like I get, I'm in the crowd and, Metallica, James gets burned again by some horrible pyrotechnic accident, and they're like, we need somebody to come on stage, and we need somebody to play Seek and Destroy, and all we have is this weird guitar that's shaped like a steering wheel. It would be like,
I know how to do that.
I'm your guy. Drag me up there. I will totally do this. So I feel like I'm preparing for something that's most likely. I'm not. You never want to say 100% not going to happen. Like there's not a 0% chance. But I don't know that anyone's invented the steering wheel guitar yet.
Someone will. Just like me, because I am a pro mattress drummer when I'm going to sleep.
Oh,
and I can pull off Megadeth songs in my head, Anthrax songs, and all that stuff. And I figure one day the same thing will happen, probably in the same concert. Be like, also, Lars is out, and we need somebody who can play the mattress.
Right, we have a mattress up here.
We have a mattress up here. Mike's ready to go. It's a Serta. It's ready to go. It's got memory foam, but yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I do that. You think before you leave on the trip, you're like, I'm going to want to listen to some new stuff, some things I haven't heard before, and I don't know what the difference is. I don't know. I don't think it's music today as much as I just feel like when I was younger. Like I can remember just buying an album, like going down to Sound Warehouse or CD Warehouse or any of these places, and buying a CD or a cassette and coming home and just laying on my bed with headphones on and opening it up and reading the lyrics, and spending an hour with that album or, multiple hours or doing my homework, with these cassettes going. And obviously they've made permanent impressions in my brain. We're going to get to this week's performer. And when I went through it and threw on like one of the greatest hits albums, and it's like I know every nuance, like every little, guitar, little bend, every extra little drum, hi-hat that's, a little cymbal crash that's here or there. It's like every one of those. And yet my wife and my daughter's birthdays are 2 days apart, and I constantly get them mixed up, which is which. It just seems ridiculous that I would know hi-hat from a song I heard 30 years ago and not know that.
You made the point just a second ago by saying that you went down to the store and you picked up that record or that cassette, and you just basically invested time into making that album or cassette part of you because you've read every ounce of the production, who mixed it, who wrote it, the thank yous, I would like to thank, every band member had that section on the back of the cassette or record, and it became part of your musical family. And that's why it's just something that chalked a mark onto you as you grew, and you grew with the album. And it became a moment in time for you. But
the way you said it, it's like I invested more in listening to Master of Puppets than I did in my daughter.
So unfortunately, it seems to be that just when it came out to when was Master of Puppets released and when was your daughter released.
Right. But if I had to choose which one I want to listen to in a car for 8 hours, it's... We're kicking it off with Battery, Master of Puppets.
Oh, gosh. There was an article, speaking of recently, about, I forgot where I read it. Maybe it was on the wonderful source of Facebook News, where Lars is responsible for cutting out some of the bass. You're smiling. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I read this story. This is
Injustice for All.
Yeah, and golly, I mean that album. I mean it's been legendary, the amount of hazing that they gave to Jason Newsted, which I never understood. It's hard enough. I was just having this discussion with my kids, and it's hard enough when Jason didn't choose for Cliff to get killed. And obviously it was an accident, and the band, talked about it, whether they were going to break up, they were going to try to get somebody, I don't know that you could ever really replace Cliff Burton, but, they bring Jason in and they do Garage Days, which is one of my favorite Metallica albums.
Same here.
I love those songs. I know they're all cover songs and stuff. And I've listened to the originals to all those, and honestly, I prefer the Metallica version, I think, in almost every case.
Same here.
So to harass that person that already feels awkward to come in there, I just never understood that. And so, the article you're referring to, basically it was that the producer, the sound engineer, saying that Lars had come in and taken over all the knob twiddling and cranked the drums up and turned the bass. He said turn the bass down to where you can't hear it and then turn it down 5 dB from there. Yeah. And it's just, I don't understand it. And if you've ever, if you want to hear a great album, go out to YouTube. It's on YouTube. You can download it from there. And you can find it from other places, as well. But if you're just looking to hear it, and there is a remix of that album called And Justice for Jason. And it is And Justice for All with, I don't know where now I heard there was, I don't know if it was from Guitar Hero but there was, because they have to put all the tracks in Guitar Hero, and so it might have been where they got the bass track from. Yeah. Because I don't think it's from the original. I mean, it is Jason's performance, but you couldn't. There's so much detail and clarity. You couldn't have got it from the original. And Justice for All, unless you had access to the master recording.
I actually wrote that down, and Justice for Jason, because I do want to check that out.
It is, and the songs don't sound right, because
right. It has bass,
right? Well, they just it sounds different, right? And Jason, like a lot of people, I feel the same way about Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine was mad about getting kicked out of Metallica for 30 years.
They needed a psychiatrist to fix that.
Yes, and then eventually, and they cried it out or whatever. And then I never saw those two bands as really being competing. Dave Mustaine
was two separate entities by that point.
I mean, he was definitely the epitome of not thrash, but thrash metal. You know, if you make that, and I know that's a pretty slight distinction to make, but you know, I mean, his thing was playing, you know, 90 miles an hour the whole time. I mean, all his solos, all his, you know, it was just a different feel than Metallica. So I never thought they were in the same space, you know, per se. But he just had, you know, he's so mad about that. And then finally, he just kind of came to terms with it. You know, like you said, I forgot, was it Some Kind of Monster or one of the...
Some Kind of Monster. That's
the Metallica documentary.
The General Hospital of Metallica.
Oh, God, wasn't that terrible? Wasn't that terrible?
Yeah, it was.
I don't want to see and not that Metallica's an idol of mine, but I don't want to see grown men crying that are supposed to be playing music. You know what I mean?
Especially
it's just
that
like,
type of music. You don't want to see that.
You know, I remember when John Wayne was sick. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, and then they like wheeled him out in a wheelchair or something. I'm like, God, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Richard Pryor shaking in a wheelchair where I can't, you know, I mean, I want to remember those people in their prime, you know, I mean, I want to remember them the way that they were, you know, when they made impressions on me or whatever, which I know is going on a big tangent, but we're never going to get this episode back on track. But the whole point of that was, I thought Jason took the high road, and I think he has for a while.
Yeah.
Where, you know, he basically said part of it was his fault because he was just mimicking the guitar tracks. And so it would just kind of made a muddy mix, and so it was the best for the album. Now, if you go listen to Injustice for Jason, I don't think that's the case. I think he's just saying that to put it to rest and move on, you know, because, you know, I don't know, as the public, we think Jason Newsted, bassist of Metallica, but the guy's obviously gone on and done other things, you know, but whenever people interview him, that's what they want to talk about. That's the same questions. Another great example is Dave Lombardo, the drummer from Slayer, who, you know, they've had their ups and downs. He was in and out, and then they had the contract thing, and now he's out, and apparently he's permanently out. He's been replaced. And, you know, he's like, I'm moving on with my life. I'm making a new band. I'm doing this stuff, you know. And then every interview, the first question, well, what do you think about this in Slayer? What do you think about that? And so people are like, all he does is talk about Slayer, but it's not his fault. That's all. Because if you're, obviously, they don't interview me about Slayer. You know, and here's a guy in Oklahoma who lives in Tornado Alley about Slayer, you know. So obviously the guy has the tie to Slayer, and that's what people want to know about. They don't care about his new band. I mean,
same thing happened to Mike Portnoy when he got booted from Dream Theater, and even today he still gets it, and it drives him crazy. And but Mike Mangini, who replaced him, they never ask him a thing. What do you think about the past drummer that was sitting here? Does that ever bother you that you have to play his songs? You know, none of that ever happened.
Yeah. I was going to say the same thing happened to the guys at Queensryche, but fortunately they're all still in Queensryche. They're just different Queensryche somehow. I don't understand that. But, well, anyway, what has been going on? Now that I've tied up the first 20 minutes of the podcast, what has been going on with you?
Well, I have been working on how to explain it? It's an alter ego type of band, I guess you would call it. It's a band that was called Ratanabres back in 2000, and it's another project that I've been working on. I had just finished an album called Zerbatron Winter Memories, which has nothing to do with metal at all, but you can go download it if you wish at zerbatron.bandcamp.com. It's kind of 80s. It's a little bit heavier than the previous album. Ratanabres is an alter ego kind of band where there's 3 band members in it. First one's Rot, second one was Tan, and Ibrez was the third gentleman in it. But actually, it was just a bunch of my friends who got together, and we created this fake heavy metal band, and we would go out and play in wigs and tie up Jack's nightclub for a night playing stupid heavy metal songs with my stepbrother playing bass and a buddy of mine, Clyde, playing drums, and we would play these songs that I wrote for this particular album. My friend John sang an 80s lyrics, making fun of every single hair band we could think of with all kinds of funny noises.
So these were all original songs?
They were original songs, but they were. There was a couple of covers. We did The Simpsons and we did Frankenstein. Originally performed. Who did Frankenstein first? Now I forgot.
Alice Cooper? That one? That's Feed by Frank Costello. Oh, you're the Edgar Winter.
Edgar Winter Group.
Yeah.
Did it first. So we did that in 2000. So a friend of mine asked me if I would be interested in doing that again. He's like, you should bring back Rotanibus. And I was like, I was like, I don't know. And I was thinking about it. I sent email to my buddy who anything I record metal I run by because he is my, heavy. Tommy Sims is my heavy metal guru, and vice versa. I think he and I collaborate whenever we can. And I still haven't heard a response. I can picture him sitting there going, no. But I'm going to go for it. So Christopher Tupa, who you can find at ctupa.com, already painted the cover for the album, which we're trying to have finished by June, July-ish. And I've already extended an offer to you to help me out with it.
I'm in it to win it. Let's do it.
Thank you so much, because for all out there in the Rusted Metal community, you're in the midst of a vocal god, and that is Rob Flack.
I think you might be overselling that.
I've heard you sing. You sang some songs in your past, and they came out really good. So the lead singer for some of the songs on the album, because a majority will be instrumental, of course.
Well, we'll see how that. Well, there will be many takes of that. And
you're saying alternate versions?
On this road trip, when I go on trips with my family, like when they ride along, everybody's like, the music's too loud. I don't like that. I don't, and my favorite thing is getting in the car, cranking it up to 11, and just singing the top. And I mean, to the point where when I left Sean's house, I had, I think about 10 bottled waters left. And I didn't even make it. I mean, I probably made it 3 or 4 hours, and I'm going through them because my throat is just raw. I'm screaming Stone Temple Pilots, and Soundgarden, and just that. There's certain bands that are in my range, and it's mostly, and don't want to pick on those two bands. Definitely not Soundgarden, but for the most part, it's bands that don't have a whole lot of talent. You know what I mean? Just guys that are screaming. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example, like MOD or something like that.
Right.
Or just guys that are yelling. I'm like, hey, I can yell. Let's all yell.
Let's all yell together.
Right.
Some people call that rehearsal.
Right. And I usually call it work, but we. If I can hear myself, I just turn the stereo up louder and louder till I can't hear myself anymore. And I'm like, look how great I sound. So you may once the stereo has been turned down and there's just my vocal track left, you might not have the same opinion of the vocals.
So I should choose the option of retraction possibly in the future. Is that
You're
what
like, and suddenly they are all instrumental.
Exactly. Well, what do you say we talk about tonight's band?
Let's get to today. Who is tonight's band?
Tonight's band is a single solitary gentleman who I think changed the shape of bridging heavy metal and 80s rock and roll / 80s pop. And that is Mr. Billy Idol.
Woo!
Yes, Mr. Billy Idol, who was born...
Wait, I don't want to say woo. I want to say right.
There you go.
I got to get in my Billy Idol sneer here.
He was born William Michael Albert Broad. And can you imagine if he stuck with that, Will Broad? It doesn't have that ring to it.
No.
He was born November 30th, 1955, making him at the time of this recording 59 years old, and he's still out there touring right now. Born in Stanmore, Middlesex, England. I'm actually in Connecticut. I'm not too far from Middlesex Hospital. Where there's a connection, we'll find out. His genres are punk rock, hard rock, glam rock, dance rock, new wave. He's in the new wave category, and post-punk. His instruments are vocals, piano, guitar, bass guitar, and drums, so there's nothing he really can't do. And he's been active from 1973 to present. His labels have been Chrysalis Records, EMI, and Sanctuary. And, of course, you can find him at www.billyidol.net. Band members really haven't, He doesn't have a long list of band members from what I've found. I could be wrong, but one of my ultimate favorite guitarists on the planet, Steve Stevens, played guitar with him from 1981 through 1986, and then 2001 to present. He plays guitar and keyboards. You have Stephen McGrath playing bass guitar and backing vocals 2001 to present. But Billy Morrison playing rhythm guitar, backing vocals 2010 to present. And Eric Eldenius.
Eldenius, yeah, that's what it looks like.
Eldenius. Drums, percussion 2012 to present. And Paul Trudeau, keyboards 2014 to present, which really isn't that long. From that point on, anything from before then, I'm not sure who was in that band with him. I think it was studio musicians.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of that. Did you read where he got his name, Billy Idol, from?
No.
He apparently he had a teacher when he was a kid insult him and nicknamed him Billy Idol, calling him IDLE because he didn't he wasn't doing anything, and so
awesome.
So it was pretty much a play on that, and he actually considered calling himself Billy Idol, spelling it IDLE, and he was afraid there would be some confusion with Eric Idle from Monty Python.
Oh, yeah.
And so it kind of got, almost like a play like Idol, like he's a rock star and Idol and Billy Idol. So that was kind of a play on the original, so it's like dual meaning, I guess.
That's awesome. But I did not know that at all.
But yeah, he's been Billy Idol for as long time. You said 1973, which is the year I was born. That is crazy that he has been recording, and we've got the discography here, and even before this started, Billy Idol was in, I guess it would just be straight punk. You would call it Generation X. Mm-hmm. And Generation X, all I have is there's a greatest hits from Generation X, and I've listened to it. It's not a favorite of mine, but it's definitely just a reflection of that era, the early punk kind of stuff, and some what do they call it, like the romantic type movement, you know what I mean? So you could hear some early hints of Billy Idol in there,
right? Early pop, kind of what you would say.
Yeah. So it's not like Sex Pistols kind of punk, and
right?
Not,
no Sid
not,
Vicious kind of.
No. So a little bit more musical than that. But for the official Billy Idol discography, we start with "Don't Stop," which was an EP from 1981. Then we had Billy Idol as self-titled, which was kind of his introduction, I guess, to the world, July of 82. Rebel Yell, which was November of 83. Vital Idol, which I think is the first Billy Idol album, the cassette that I actually owned. Mm-hmm. And that came out in 1985 in the there's an international version and a UK version, and then there was a new US version in 87. There was Whiplash Smile in September of 86. Really just a release, every year, every couple of years.
Yeah. Hard-working guy.
Yeah. Idol Songs, which was kind of one of many greatest hits albums released. I don't know if it's through if he had to do doings with this, or if it was through the label. I don't know, but he has a lot of greatest hits albums.
Yeah.
But we had Idol Songs in 88, Charmed Life in 1990. Cyberpunk, which was very early on the cyberpunk movement. That was in June of 1993. Mm-hmm. Another Greatest Hits, released in March of 2001. This is switching from Chrysalis over to Capitol Records. We had the VH1 Storytellers in February of 2002. Devil's Playground, this was another label switch when he got picked up by Sanctuary, and if I'm correct, I think that was only one album he did with Sanctuary. Mm-hmm. But we had Devil's Playground in 2005. Happy Holidays from Billy Idol in 2006. I do not have that album, but I'm going to go track that down. And then we have, I can't even imagine, like, Merry Christmas, oi!
I saw some on YouTube, and believe it or not, it's not bad.
Yeah,
it's really not bad. There's part of me's gone, maybe I should get that album.
Then we have the very best of Billy Idol, Idolize Yourself in 2008. And then finally, Kings and Queens of the Underground, which was October 2014. And that was another label change with BFI Records.
I'm with you 100% on the same album. I think that was my first one, too. It was Vital Idol, 1985, now that I think about it. It's a great album.
Vital Idol, for me, I mean, it's it doesn't have, it's missing Rebel Yell. Like, that song is not on there. But other than that, I would be happy with that album. I know he's released a lot of things since then. Of course, it doesn't have Cradle of Love. That's a later song,
Right.
So there are a few hits that aren't on it, but honestly, if I had to pick one album, that's the one I would,
your starter,
I would
right
stick
there.
with.
Yeah.
But along with all those albums, he also has a brief filmography. He appeared in The Doors. He was Jim Morrison's drinking buddy. I can't think of his name, Cal or Cab or whatever. I can't think of his name, but in everything I've ever seen him in, he just plays himself, basically.
Yeah, it's the same, same deal.
When you see him, you're like, oh, there's Billy Idol, and then he has that great cameo at the end of The Wedding Singer, on the plane, and puts everything together, and that, I think that was almost like a comeback kind of thing for me, like I hadn't thought of Billy Idol in a long time. And then all of a sudden,
by the way,
right? And then you're like, "Oh, there's Billy Idol, The Wedding Singer." I saw that. I actually saw that in a theater, and I got all excited. I was like, hey,
"There's Billy.
That's Billy Idol."
Goodness. How did you discover the band? How did you discover Billy?
It was definitely through MTV. All of a sudden, MTV was picking people that had interesting visual aesthetics, in their videos. You have like Duran Duran and, of course, Michael Jackson and all these people that were using, bright colors and interesting locations and stuff. And all of a sudden, you've got this guy with bleach blonde hair, this spike, all these spiky wrist things, and covered in cheesecloth, and
cheesecloth,
right?
80s
Just
metal godwear,
and of course his eternal, sneer, and just punching into the air, and it's just like this ultimate rebellion thing. So I'm pretty sure it was White Wedding was the first video I can remember, but also I got a cassette, like a boombox, around maybe like 82, 83, something like that.
Yeah. And
I would go to Walmart and get these K-Tel albums, like K-Tel's greatest hits, and it'd be these compilations. And so I had this one, K-Tel's Hot Tracks. It came out in 83. And I have the set list here. There's 5 songs on each side. On the side one, you have Maniac from Michael Sambello. I mean, these are all just quintessential early 80s. Sweet Dreams, Human Touch by Rick Springfield, and then White Wedding from Billy Idol, and Mr. Roboto.
My sister had this album.
I love this. If you look it up on Amazon, there's 2 extra songs listed on each side, and I don't know what that's. I think that's the vinyl had extra tracks or something, because mine only had those 5, and then the backside is King of Pain by The Police, This Time for Bryan Adams, Rock of Ages by Def Leppard. And then I love this song, Mexican Radio by Wall of Voodoo.
Yeah, I used to play that live. That was so easy to do.
Yeah, I love that
song. This always, and they loved it. Free beer,
barbecued iguana. I love that. And Promises by Naked Eyes. But anyway, so I had this K-Tel album, Hot Tracks, and I just listened to the crap out of this album. I mean, there's so many albums, this, where you get a few good songs and then the rest is filler, and you're constantly listening to track 1, track 2, and then rewind or whatever. I listen to this tape all the time. So I heard White Wedding from Billy Idol an awful lot.
Yeah, I bet.
During those times, and of course there were later videos and stuff on MTV, but yeah, I think those 2 things, White Wedding on MTV and that K-Tel album, is what got me in. What about you?
Well, first, thank you for bringing back Hot Tracks, the train on the cover and everything. I haven't seen that in years. And but yes, for me, it was MTV Dancing with Myself.
Oh, yeah.
And the first time I saw that, I thought this guy is an idiot because he's up there and he's dressed like something out of the Mad Max movies,
Right, right.
And all the zombie ladies and guys are dancing around him. And I thought, the thing that was going through my head at the time, and I remember that vividly, that my dad says, rock and roll is not going to live forever. This stuff is just not going to last. And I'm looking at this, and it's the first time I was like, this is kind of weird. It's getting a little theatrical for me.
Right.
Until the song got to the part where he's going, sweat, 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 sweat. And I was like, yeah, sweat. Sweat. Oh, man.
Sweat, Dad.
I'm becoming a punk, glam rock infused freak. And I thought, you don't know about sweat, Dad, like you said.
Right. This is my generation sweat, Dad.
Yeah, it's my turn to sweat. But I couldn't stand the song in the beginning, and now I love that song. I hear that, and I got to admit, when I'm playing it by myself, I get a little Molly Ringwald moves going on.
So, a few years ago, I went on this is what we do in the summer. We take road trips with the kids, and I think it's when we were in Florida. Mm-hmm. And we go to the Hard Rock Cafe, and we sit down at this booth, and there's this guitar, and it is a guitar that belonged to Steve Stevens.
Oh, I love Steve Stevens.
And then it says on there, as performed or whatever, and I don't remember, it was one of the videos or whatever, but with Billy Idol. And my kids go crazy. They're like, Billy Idol, no way, and I want to say it was Rebel Yell, but they go crazy, and the waitress is like, and then, of course, my kids were much younger then. I mean, like maybe,
right.
6 and 9 or something like that. And she's like, wow, you are really raising your children right. And I'm like, thank you, and they leave, and then I turn and I'm like, how do you know who Billy Idol is, And they knew Billy Idol from Rock Band.
Right.
I know Rebel Yell. Well, there's, of course, Guitar Hero and Rock Band. I think White Wedding is in Rock Band. Mm-hmm. And then there was the downloadable stuff, like where you could add on songs. You could get Moni Moni and Rebel Yell. Mm-hmm. But so it's like a whole new generation of kids, that are being exposed to classic metal and stuff. So, yeah, I love that.
Isn't that weird to think that those kids think of Billy Idol the way that we think of old metal being Black Sabbath?
Oh,
isn't that weird?
I don't know if I mentioned this on the show. I may have mentioned it on a previous episode, but my dad was talking to me one time about the Beatles, and I was like, the thing about the Beatles is they're just so far before my time frame. This is what I was telling him, and the Beatles invasion was in '64, right? Mm-hmm. And I was born in '73, so. Give or take a few months. It's basically 10 years before I was born, To put that in perspective, my son was born in 2001. So 10 years before him was the grunge invasion. I mean, that's 10 years before him. September 91, I think it's September 91, is Smells Like Teen Spirit. Yeah. And then you have Soundgarden that same time. You have Alice in Chains that same time. And Pearl Jam, so the big four. So the way that I think of Beatles as being something from the past, something that's shot in black and white. You know what I mean? And the Ed Sullivan Show, that same frame is what Nirvana is to my son, which I'm just completely, just mind blowing to me because I don't want him to think of them as being old, which is why when he goes. I know, but
he will. Imagine what does your dad think of Nirvana? That's a question to ask.
He would just punch me in the face if I turned Nirvana on. He would hit me. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I asked Santa for a copy of Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise, which I got. Santa brought me the 45, and so
nice.
when we were done opening all our gifts, my dad says, you better put that record on so we can hear it, and I put it on, and my parents would have the same look on their face if I had pulled the dog in from outside and just eviscerated it in front of the whole family, like cut it from head to toe, splayed it out, and pulled all the organs out and hung them on the tree. The exact same look. And then when it was done and you have that little sound like hitting the needle at the end, and my dad said, I don't ever want to hear that song again. That's his exact
They
words.
lasted through the entire song, though. That was
They
good.
sat there just with this
Step in the
look
right
of
direction.
horror on their face, and every now and then my dad will say something like, he goes, you know what the difference is between your music and my music? You can't whistle your music. that's one of his things, and so we just recently took a road trip to Chicago. My grandma passed away last month, and so my dad, my parents rode with me and my daughter, and I was flipping radio stations, and Metallica's version of Stone Cold Crazy came on.
Oh, gosh.
And my dad is a huge Queen fan, and so I left it on there for just a minute to see if he would look, to see if he would recognize it or whatever. And then he said something like, so now we're on to the acid rock portion or something like that. And I go, and I flipped the channel and I said, well, I thought you might recognize it. It was Metallica's version of Stone Cold Crazy. And he said, no, it wasn't. That's what he said. No, it wasn't. So it was just like denial, like that didn't happen.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So my dad listened to he listened to Jimi Hendrix. He listened to he wasn't a Doors fan, but he had some Led Zeppelin albums and stuff. So
he was a rocker. He would be what we are today.
Right. But there's some, it's just that generation thing where,
of course.
Right. And now the things that my son wants to listen to, he thinks old music is anything with a guitar.
Isn't that weird?
Right. I mean, if it doesn't go whoa, 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 then he's not in. You know what I mean? That's all he wants is something that sounds like a computer is broken. That's what he wants.
What kind of neural processing do you have to get? It must be my age, but as soon as I hear any synthesizer use a mod wheel and do that, it just drives me crazy. I'm like, no.
When we're in the car, every now and then I'll play a game, like a drum beat will start, and I'll be like, I'll just ask my wife, so who is this? And she's like listening. I'm like, listen to the guitar, listen to, and because bands have that, signature sound.
Yeah.
And so I just can't imagine kids playing that game someday. Like, oh yeah, the way that goes. Oh, that's definitely
Skrillex.
Right.
That's got to be Skrillex.
Only Johnny Depp did that with his synthesizers.
I thought that was Stridex. No, that was Skrillex. Jeez.
So
yeah, you're right. You can't, and those will be golden oldies one day. Mm-hmm. Somebody will be on a commercial for TV with their head shaved and long hair in the back and the front. And hey, remember the good old 2020s? Remember when your bowels felt like they were coming up your throat? Well, now K-Tel has.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Our choice for favorite album from the band.
What was your favorite album that you remember from Billy Idol days?
Well, like I said, if I had to just pick a favorite one, it would probably be Vital Idol. Maybe if I could, if I could put it on CD and I could throw Rebel Yell and maybe Cradle of Love on there or something, that would be like the perfect album for me. I think my favorite Billy Idol song is probably Rebel Yell. That's why it pains me to pick Vital Idol because, man, to me, that song is just like quintessential. It's like 80s rock. You've got, it starts off with the keyboards. You've got that guitar riff that comes in, you've got Billy Idol singing, and then in the chorus you've got him yelling. You have those Steve Stevens guitar solos in the middle of the song. I remember watching an interview one time. I was on Headbangers Ball, and they had Steve Stevens. It was when I don't know if he had left Billy Idol, but he had started the Atomic Playboys, which was
right. I remember
that band, and so they had him on there for that. And they debuted a song, and he said that he had invented a I don't know what do you call it, like a guitar effects box he called it the machine gun.
Well, he took. You remember the keychain things that you could buy, and they had the buttons on them where one sounded like it was like an 8-bit sound, and then you had the siren that went.
Listen to this.
And now, back to Rusted Metal.
What he did was he took that thing apart and hooked it up to his pickups on the guitar, and then while he was playing, he would do that. He would hook that up to the pickup, and that's what made that sound. That signature sound.
I remember him saying like he called it like his machine gun sound or something like that.
And he's the first one to do it. I mean, it was a stumble upon. I think it wasn't really an invention, but it was a pretty cool thing to do during a guitar solo. No one knew how to do it.
Yeah, just that song. I think for me is just. It's got everything in it, and like we talked about on the discography, I was looking through just on the ones that I personally have acquired over the years. There's Billy Idol's greatest hits. There's that Billy Idol Idolize Yourself.
Yeah,
the 7 or the Billy Idol songs 11 of the best, and then like I said, Vital Idol. So I don't know why there's so many, and if you look at the song lists on them, they are all pretty similar.
Yeah, it's because, and they don't seem to be like different versions. It's not like you're getting a special cut on any different album. It's just he had so many songs that were in the top 10 in his career during a very impacting time, for lack of better English. But in the 80s, that, what's going to sell? A bunch of greatest hits by Billy Idol.
Right.
Definitely.
Nobody wants all the classic tracks from Cyberpunk.
No. There's not a big call for it.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was Eyes Without a Face. I've always loved that song for the simplicity of it. The keyboard work was very simple. This was something that was recorded in New York with a Linn drum machine, and Linn drums were pretty new and awesome. It was programmed drums that were put in there. Bass parts played by a Mr. Steve Weber, and the female parts were sung by Perry Leister, who actually still sings nowadays too, but she's the one who sang "Let You Sounds Beside You," which is Eyes Without a Face in French. Which
I had no idea what that was.
Yeah,
until just now.
That's what that was. Till now, really.
Yeah.
I didn't either until I looked it up. So there you go. But the thing that I loved most about that song was just the simplicity of it, and it made it all the way to number 4 in the U.S. And and 1984 for Billboard mainstream rock tracks, of all time, it made number 5. So Billboard's Hot 100.
Isn't that number 4. Am I thinking of the right song? At the end, it has that kind of rocking part.
Yeah. And then he raps over it.
Chop, 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 chop. That little part, yeah.
Oh,
that's a good song.
Steve Stevens' work, guy is amazing. He really is good. There's a Christmas album that Steve Vai produced, Merry Xmas and then Merry Xmas 2.
Yep.
And I think it's the first one. I think it's Merry Xmas 2. Steve Stevens appeared on it. And he did this amazing rendition of Do You Hear What I Hear? Which is awesome because during that solo that he's playing in there, he does the good old-fashioned trick of hooking up that keychain sound effects processor to his amp or to his pickup. And during the Do You Hear What I Hear, he starts it off with a nice Spanish guitar solo, and then it jumps into this funky screaming, wah-pedaled synthetic guitar sound, and it has that bomb and the siren noise coming in full strength. And
wow.
That was just nice to hear again. And I think that was 2000. I think it was like 2008 when that came out, or 2000. No, that was around 2003. Excuse me.
Okay.
It's a while ago, but still, it was nice to hear that again. Being produced by him, and he did a really good job. He is a great soloist.
I think that the Steve Stevens, that interview that I saw with him and the Atomic Playboys and all that, was one of the first times where, I mean, obviously there were bands like Van Halen where you knew all the people, or bands that had a name, it had four people. But usually when there was a band that was just named like Michael Jackson, okay, so he was a performer, and so I didn't care who Michael Jackson's drummer was.
Right.
He didn't have a personality to me. It was, it was the background music, other than Eddie Van Halen doing the guitar solo and Beat It, but other than that, I didn't know who any of the guitarists were, or the bass player, what. It didn't matter to me,
Right.
So this was, Billy Idol was, to me, it was Billy Idol singing on top of music. I didn't care who those people were. And then all of a sudden this guy comes to the forefront and you're like, oh, he was doing, all this cool stuff,
Yeah.
So it was kind of a moment for me to realize that all those guys were talented musicians. They weren't just the backing band for some other guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he had the coolest hair.
They had some big hair.
He had a flock of seagulls frontman hair, but in black. So you had your choice there, which was nice.
Favorite cover.
It's funny. I saw this, and I didn't even know at the time that Moni Moni was a cover song.
Yeah.
I just...
Me neither. At the time, I did not either.
Right. I think as kids, we just assumed that was a Billy Idol song. We just took it for that, and he does a good job of making it sound like a Billy. It doesn't jump out at you like, oh, this isn't a Billy Idol song, So,
right.
But my favorite cover of a Billy Idol song is from the Donnas, who do a great version of "Dancing with Myself," which of course takes up all these different connotations anyway. If you know the Donnas, and they're very sexual and progressive in the first place, and of course they're all. They play, I call it like sloppy rock. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
That's
it's
a good
not,
way to put it.
Just out there banging away on stuff. And so, I don't remember. It's on one of their albums, and they play it live too. But I remember just listening to one of the albums and hearing that come on, and I was like, "Oh, this is a great fit for them," So, and there's nothing wonderful about the technical performance or anything like that, but it's just. It just comes off sounding like Donna's song,
Yeah.
So I always like that version.
Well, I like the Blink 182's version of "Dancing with Myself." I think they did a good job on that, and they actually, it's not much different from Billy's version, of course, but it's Blink 182. It sounded pretty good. There's a band called Children of Bottom that did Rebel Yell, and that one is pretty decent. But for me, it's Billy Idol covering other songs. And in searching for a good choice for covers of Billy Idol songs, I noticed that Billy Idol covers songs like Bang a Gong, T-Rex. His version is amazing. And his version of Van Halen's Jump is truly, lack a better word, amazing. Just watching Steve Stevens run amok on a Van Halen solo. He did a really good job. There's a couple versions where you could, during it, he's like, I can't compete. But there's one particular one, which I will put in the show notes, and I shared with you. He kicks a solo that is 10 times as good as Eddie Van Halen's. No offense to the great Eddie Van Halen, but he did a great job on that. And Billy can really sing. He can really hit some high notes, too.
That was, I went through a lot of his discography over the past couple of weeks. Not just the greatest hit stuff. I went through all the greatest hit stuff, but some of the newer stuff. And, he has several ballads. And that was really something that stuck out, for me at least, is that he's really a versatile performer. He's not a guy that's not a one-trick pony. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, obviously, when people there's lots of impersonations of Billy Idol. You know, you see it on maybe not as much now as back in the day, but you saw it on Saturday Night Live. I think in Weird Al's video for UHF or whatever, he does a Billy Idol impersonation, and it always gravitates to basically what you were talking about, the Dancing with Myself, you know, that look with the just punching into the air and the sneer and the stereotypical Billy Idol, but the guy really is talented. You know, he really does. I mean, you get into some of the other work and stuff, and there's a lot more to him than just the stuff you hear on the radio.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a lot of gusto in him, even at 59, because most of those videos I've seen him performing, even other people's music, were very recent. Very recent. So he's still going. And he's not cracking either, which most of the rock stars today trying to sound like then do.
Right,
he does not crack. He's still got it strong.
Yeah. So I got to mention this, and this is something that I don't know that a lot of our listeners would be familiar with, but as you know, I do Sprite Castle, my podcast about Commodore 64 games. I grew up, you know, with a Commodore and doing all that stuff, and
I love that show, by the way.
There was thanks, man.
Throw a link out.
Oh, just go to spritecastle.com, or better yet, go to throwbacknetwork.net, where you can find, as I like to say, your home for quality retro podcasts. But there was a time where, you know, other computers like the TRS-80 just had a speaker that just beeped. That's all it did. And the Apple had an internal speaker that it made sound, but I didn't think it was great, you know. But the Commodore 64 had these 3 voices, and you could make music, and you could do these things. And then they found out, you know, I don't know the technical in and outs, but they could digitize music. And so, I mean, it's nowhere near the quality of an MP3 or anything like that. But you could digitize these short little snippets. I remember calling my dad in, and I was like, I've downloaded this. It was just called Led Zeppelin, and it was about an 8-second clip of a Led Zeppelin song. And it sounded like scratchy AM radio. You know what I mean? Yeah. And more importantly, what I remember is it took up about half of a floppy disk. And so at 300 baud, it had probably taken me 2 hours to download this thing, you know? And so I bring my dad in and I load it up and run it. And we were amazed. It was actually hearing an audio recording, you know? But there was only so much you could do. I mean, literally, you know, it was 8 seconds long.
Right.
So there was one a couple years later called Flesh for Fantasy, and I did not know that it was a Billy Idol song. I didn't know what it was. It was just, you know, said it was digitized music. And if you know the song Flesh for Fantasy, the remix one where it starts off with the almost digitized sounding where it has the drum beat, dun ch dun dun ch, and then that guitar lick, dun 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 dun. Yeah. And so what they had done was not sample it like hitting record, like the 8 seconds of that Led Zeppelin thing, but they had sampled the kick drum and the snare and that guitar sample. And so they were putting it, like they were looping it and playing it over and over and over, and then, you know, modifying the speed and the length of it, the guitar sample and stuff, and playing the drums and changing, you know, how they played. And so it's like the first remix I ever heard. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Because they had taken the parts of a song and taken it apart and put it back together to make, and then the song, I don't know how long, it plays for about, maybe 20 seconds, and then it has a breakdown kind of part, and then it loops. And so it will play forever, you know? And of course, when you're a kid, you're like, how is this playing forever? You don't get it.
It's mind-blowing, literally,
It was, you know? And then, you know, later on when I got Vital Idol, and heard the Flesh for Fantasy remix, and I'm like, that's where it came from, so I was able to connect the dots. But just hearing, that was like the first, like I said, taking digital samples and taking those things apart and putting them in. And I'll never forget that. Like that song, when I hear that, that's what it makes me think of every time.
That's awesome. What would be the file extension for that type of sound?
Oh, they were just programs. I mean, it was a thing that you loaded up and ran, because the Commodore only had
files, I guess, but
yeah, similar. It's same, comparable, yeah. But you loaded it up and you ran it, and like I said, it would just loop forever.
That's awesome. I'm kind of interested in recording an album like that. Now that hearing you talk about it, because I've never heard of that before.
Well, they used a lot of. I'll have to see if there's a recording or a way to do it. I mean, obviously you can play it on a real Commodore 64, but they did a lot of. We'll have to see, because I know they did a lot of sound tricks. With getting the sound chips and things to do things they weren't designed to do. Yeah. And so a lot of times when you try to replicate that in emulators and things like that, they don't work right, because it was actually using hardware level tricks to do that, So I know it's not completely 100% related to Billy Idol, but it's definitely that song, man. Like I said, every time I hear it, and it's just it just takes you right back to that moment, where you were hearing something that you would later hear on a cassette and make that connection. But that remix, just that idea of taking apart someone else's song and putting it back together in a different way was I had never seen that before.
Well, that would probably be like the birth of simplifying the, cutting up a WAV file and turning it into the MP3 type of fashion,
Yep.
Definitely.
Just digital sampling, yep.
Well, let's discuss what's coming up next. I see that there's a list here that you made where the word no is in front of it.
Well, so here's the thing. Well, we're going through alphabetically. We've said that, and we're going through, and so you have to talk about like what the scope of the show is. Like in the first 20 minutes, the scope of the show is my vacation, but but I'm thinking like 80s. And like we said, classic metal. So as I'm looking through the B's, and really we're at the B's right now. I was like, okay, well, we could talk about Black Flag. And I'd be honest with you, back in the day, I was definitely not a Black Flag. I didn't discover Black Flag until I saw Henry Rollins.
Right, same. 90s on a skateboard is when I found out about them.
Yeah. So I can't pretend like I was a huge Black Flag fan back as a kid. I wasn't. The Black Label Society, I love, Zakk Wylde, but it's not classic 80s.
Yeah, and I'm not a fan of I like Zakk Wylde's White Christmas song, and that's it. I'm not a big fan of it.
And then I was like, well, Blondie, I know that they talk about her being like part of the punk movement and stuff like that, but it's not metal.
But she's so cute.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
I ruled those out.
Obviously, yeah.
And so then I had like a list of possible ones, and so I had come up with Body Count. Now that it's Ice-T's metal band. Now I think that's probably 90, 91, so that might be pushing our time frame or whatever. I love the first Body Count album. I mean,
I gotta admit, I was very impressed. I didn't have it. I didn't own it, so I would be interested in learning about the show as a host and a guest with you.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of that. The whole controversy, remember, with Cop Killer?
Oh yeah,
song on there, and there big was deal. I had the Ice-T album OG, Original Gangster, which was an Ice-T album, and then the Body Count song was on that, and he introduced it and said, hey, this is going to be on my new metal album or whatever, and so
I was Power. I had Power.
Oh yeah,
Power album, my favorite album. Grew up on that.
I was a big Ice-T fan. I was big at it. We could do an 80s rap podcast too, but never the two
Fresh
shall
show
meet.
coming up.
Oh yeah, it's the show. So who else did I have? I had Bullet Boys as a possibility. Bullet Boys is a great classic 80s metal band.
Yeah.
The problem with Bullet Boys is I think they only have 3 albums, and one of them is like almost a reunion get back together type album. They really only had 2 albums back then. And, I just don't know how much we'd have to talk about the Bullet Boys, to be honest with you.
I only had the cassette for about a week, and I gave it back to my brother, and I told him I really wasn't interested.
Smooth Up In Ya, I thought was a great song. They did For the Love of Money, that cover song, and they may have had 1 or 2 other videos, but, and the dude, they were a good band. They're just, I don't know. There's not that much to talk about with them. And then I ran out of bees, and I got to Cinderella. And Cinderella is definitely we're going to do that. The discussion is not whether or not we're going to cover Cinderella. The discussion is if we're going to cover anybody before we get to Cinderella.
We'll put Cinderella on that burner in the back left corner.
Okay.
And keep them warm because I did have the Cinderella album, and I had a lot of girlfriends through the Cinderella album.
Yes.
So Cinderella album is very important.
Cinderella was the headliner of the first concert I ever went to.
Oh, really?
And you know who opened for him? Bullet Boys. and you know who opened for them? You ready for this? Winger.
Don't say Winger. Really?
Yep.
I have a closet. I am a closet Winger fan.
The dude is super talented, and it was just whatever bad reputation he may have had, Beavis and Butthead just sealed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I thought he was a great writer. He's a bit of an overacting kook, and but the guitarist was great. I forgot his name now, but
was it Reb? Reb Beach? Is it Reb Beach, or was that with?
I can't remember.
Yeah, it is Reb Beach.
That's right.
Yep, he
as Winger. If I remembered.
Yeah. He played with Whitesnake, and he played with Alice Cooper.
Oh man.
Yep. So
I used to loop his guitar solos because I always wanted a finger tap like that. The guy was amazing. The guy was amazing.
But so it was Winger, Bullet Boys, and Cinderella.
That's a heck of a show.
Was my very first concert. I was 15.
Well, speaking of the letter B,
yes.
Names that I put, which I know we're not going to cover, but there would be no Cinderella without Bon Jovi. You know that.
Yeah. Yes.
But I don't want to cover Bon Jovi because strictly, I can't say I don't like Bon Jovi. I am sick of hearing Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
Bon Jovi has gotten on my nerves, especially in Pandora, when I'm trying to listen to summer 80s rock, and every single other song is, slippery.
Wow.
It gets tiring after a while. There was a band called Bad for Good, but it was like a one record.
I don't know them.
Bad for Good were the 4 kids that Steve Vai came across and taught that one kid to play exactly like him.
Oh. And
they were really bad. The lead singer was the guy from Terminator 2 with the red hair. Or no, Terminator 2. He was the kid with the red hair that was...
Danny somebody or something, yeah.
Yeah, that's the lead singer for Bad for Good.
Really?
And the band was really good, and I don't know what happened to him. But it fell apart. But it was a Steve Vai production. It was like mini Steve Vais.
All right.
And then Black and Blue, which I didn't know much about, but they began with B, so I put them on the list. Same with Blue Murder. And
I remember Blue Murder just like, oh, God.
The best way to put them is they were a TNT fuse that went out before the bomb went off. It was like... That's the best way to define them.
Yeah.
And then Brittany Fox, which is
love Brittany Fox.
Did you?
At the girls' school. That's a great video. I love that video. My baby broke all the rules. That is a great song. But that video is the extent of my Brittany Fox knowledge.
Yeah, the same here. That to me was again that fuse again, but now you got to put pantyhose on it.
This is, if you ever, to make an analogy here,
Okay.
if you ever talk to hair metal bands, and I'm just going to randomly pick one like Dokken, okay? And then when you see interviews with those guys, they will say, "Oh yeah, we saw the hair metal thing going on around us. Now we weren't hair metal, but." Everybody else was hair metal. I specifically saw an interview with Crocus, who said that exact thing.
Yeah.
Def Leppard doesn't think they were hair metal. Bon Jovi does not think he was hair metal. You know what I mean? So
Anybody who touched a can of Aquanet was hair metal.
So all these bands think that they were the ones that weren't. You know what I mean? Like we were
Exactly.
true rockers. We were just doing it, to sell albums. But everybody, all those other people, they were hair metal. Nobody wants to associate with it. So anyway, I mean, when I see Brittany Fox, I would just say, they're a Cinderella clone. Now, my guess is they don't think of themselves as being that way. I'm sure they're very talented musicians, and they probably did a lot of stuff. But to me, that's what they just look like, a Cinderella clone. You know what? Here's the deal. When we do Cinderella, we will have an honorary mention. We will talk about Brittany Fox doing
Okay,
Girls
that sounds fair.
We'll throw them in there.
Well, you know what? I think obviously the choice is very obvious. We're going to have to do body count.
All right. Oh, that sounds great.
It sounds like the next episode will definitely body count. I'm going to be a spectator with some input of my reaction now because unfortunately I did not have the album.
Okay.
But I do remember Cop Killer. I do remember him being on Arsenio Hall during an interview with that particular song. I think Arsenio was the only one that got a really good interview out of him from that situation. From what I remember, I could be wrong. And so I'm very interested. So body count will be in our next show, definitely.
All right. That sounds good.
Time to go.
So, now I know that, did you have some music for the end of the show this time?
I sure do, as a matter of fact.
Is it body count?
It is. It's actually it's a mathematical piece I wrote myself about human. No, it's a song called "Sledding" that I did for the Zerbatron Winter Memories album, which a good friend of mine who actually is the owner of the blogspot site Synthetics FM told me, "You're getting a little heavy there, Zerb." Because I sent him copies of this for the Synthetics FM site to play some of the music. And I said, yeah, I guess I am. And so that's my choice tonight. I'm going to play Sledding from the Zerbatron Winter Memories album. And again, you can get this album completely free from zerbatron.bandcamp.com. You can find my buddy Rob Flack O'Hara at robohara.com. Correct?
I was just thinking, as diametrically opposed as two songs could be, is Sledding and Cop Killer. Which, like,
That's very true.
The two sentences, like one is about the greatest. Like, there's no time when you're a kid in winter when you're more happy than getting a piece of plastic and going down a snowy hill. And that feeling you get in your stomach, and it's just so enjoyable. And the other one is about shooting police officers in the face.
There's a little contrast there.
That is as far as you can get.
There's a little happy medium that involves snowballs and just getting a cop really pissed off. And that's about it.
That is the North Pole and the South Pole of musical topics.
So I'll go ahead and close the show out with that song. And Flack, thank you so much for joining me in this beautiful rendition of memoirs of the greatest time in history, which was 80s metal.
Sweet. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to getting body count in the house.
That's right. I see. All right, brother. So talk to you guys soon. Everybody enjoy some good old-fashioned Billy Idol when you get the chance.
All of Zerbinator's music and podcasts are under the Creative Commons license, which allows retelling and rebroadcasting as long as the author is notified and credited. For more great escape pods, please visit www.zerbinator.wordpress.com. If you would like to contact Zerbinatorland, you can send an email to instrumentally@gmail.com or give us a call at 571-408-ZERB or 9372.